Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start the 9th webinar organized by Renforcer to share the tools that we used so that everybody can continue to reinforce those good practices in Madagascar. So today, in this session, we're going to attack the theme, which is reinforce the control of the community on the wash services based on the local communities. Recall, for those who have not participated in the other presentations, Renforcer is a project aiming at improving equitable access to wash services. This is a project of 6 years, funded by USAID and implemented by a consortium conducted by CARE with CLS, Water Aid, Bushproof, and Sandanjan. Our presentation would be structured into 3 parts. For the first part, we are going to discuss why to reinforce the control of the community on the wash services and how did we implement the strategy and what tools have we used. A few people in the communes are in the knowing of the laws and the national policies, so they are not able to ask for quality services from the providers. On the other hand, the local authorities and the service providers lack political willingness on the national policies, lack of technical capacities and lack of resources to take into account the demands of the community, but also to improve the equitable access to wash services. And those communities are poorly informed. The weak environment and the lack of services are the 3 main causes preventing from the universal accesses and the use of sustainable wash services. The civic engagement to allow the individuals to be associated in decision-making process related to their well-being. This is very important if you want to improve the wash sector. This is a factor of belongings, efficacy. The civic engagement is an essential condition to implement technically those to reach the SDG, sustainable development of the right to information is part of the principle of human rights to drinking water and sanitation, and even the laws and political orientation are needs the civic engagement for the implementation. So to have responsible citizens to render the authorities accountable and explain those rights to wash. Why? This is to reinforce, to raise the voice of the community, to reinforce for structural reinforcement, to have equitable access to wash services for all, and also to establish an interactive process to reinforce and to raise the voice of those citizens, but also to attack the social barriers and the systemic in the context and the regulatory frame, but also to orient the policies. And how did we implement that? For that, we set a dialogue space like the SLC to include the different stakeholders locally to discuss, to dialogue, to propose dialogues, and by creating those dialogue spaces like mechanisms of accountability where the community members can interact with the communes and the operators to identify the gaps and the challenges at the level of those service users, and also the service providers to find consensus, common ground on how we can improve the provision of services. And this dialogue space would would put structures so that the community can grow their ideas and propose to this dialogue space. Other leaders were important decision makers are important to be part of this process because they have the duty to provide the services and to serve as a regulator to make sure that the laws and the policies are implemented appropriately and that the service providers are providing affordable quality services as well, and to ensure that those infrastructures are maintained and well managed. We also have the consideration of those service providers because their capacity and the willingness to provide the necessary services. For example, the use of the tools for social accountability. If that is not accessible, we can use different types of accountability mechanisms. What we are using when we speak of accountability mechanisms for those who would like to share their ideas, and in case of the operators are not accountable, there are structures that we reinforced, like the SLC. It is composed with different social entities, and which is led by the commune. We have the representatives of the women and the associations available at the level of room. This is a space where they can debate and propose some solutions at the level of the communes. In some instances where we worked, we had the SLC to work on hygiene reinforcement, to discuss on the different challenges on the non-functional water points. And when we reinforce the SLC, these structures are going through 4 steps, which is the diagnosis. We mobilize the people, and then we put in place structures in conformity with the existing laws and we are activating the different cells so that we have different entities included to have an effective usage of the system. After that, apart from those structures, they would structure their ideas, start discussions to suggest some solutions that we talked about, and the decision to do frequent meetings. Most of the time, it is profitable because we are keeping frequent meetings on a monthly basis, and this is to apply decisions we made, for example, the reoperationalization of the water points, for example. The second space of dialogue that we mentioned is what we call the accountability mechanisms, which allow us to collect the feedback from the community and to transfer those information and to inform the population on the measures decided by the communes and feed into the discussions on how we can improve the quality of the services. One of the accountability mechanisms is the ID box in blue. There is a chain of treatment of those information which is accountable to the commune. The commune has been trained on how to use those idea box and where to put them, and they also are in the knowing of the process which is in the box below the pictures and on how to treat those information. So those ID box are set in a place where everybody can see them, and in the communes most of the time we have many meetings where people can discuss the quality of services and the access to those services, and to encourage the communes to share information and the measures that were made. And locally, we trained our community agents to facilitate those meetings where the community assesses the quality of the services provided by the operators and the communes, and the service providers can also assess the quality of the services, and from that there are meetings where dialogue spaces are developed, where the two sides are joining together action plan defined in and in terms of logistics, there is a green line which is used to call freely and to share their complaints locally, and there is also another treatment chain which is disseminating and transferring those information. So these are accountability mechanisms and the community, the communes were trained on how to use those accountability mechanisms locally. So one of the efforts that were made when people are expressing their feedback, we encourage the decision makers or the service providers to take actions related to those complaints and share the informations that need to be transferred to the communities and how they're going to put that in place. So these are cases of dialogue spaces we can share. I also would like to speak of the CSO, and we need to see how the different types of association that can be put in place to promote the use of wash services, and we're going to mobilize those people to meet on what we call wash CSO. Some communities are endowed with those structures to advocate on the access and the quality of the services. Also, those local associations are strengthened by the communal CSOs, so that these latter can raise their voice, bring up the complaints, and when we spoke of dialogue mechanisms during the meetings, the use of ID box and the community meetings where they can mobilize their representatives through the dialogues set by the SLC. So we have different steps, for example, the inventory, the identification of the network, and then after that we need to put in place their action plan, activities, and we qualify them as actives, and we support them so that those actives would be transformed into changes in the wash system, and particularly at the level of the different networks. We have the association of the users of drinking water. So they serve as intermediates between the service providers and the users. So here, for example, we have the Ministry of Trades. They go and meet the users, and they would serve as intermediates between the users and the service providers, and these representatives are going to be the voices of the users, so that the different low rights, users' rights are respected, and they would this structure is we call ASREP, is doing the coaching on those different points. When we do some inventory, and the OSCH is structuring, following them, and OCH is in the commune, and ASREP is a member of STEH, and they're working on water sanitation and hygiene, and they are composed of people who are living in the premises of water points. And as we said earlier, the communes have to work with the STEH, or the technical services, and to support the communes to make decisions and take some measures. All the tools used by the STEH are shared on the website. So this is so these actions were used for decision making, and I'm going to present to you the different tools we used for that sake. Those tools are divided into different types. We have the training tools. The meat is improving those tools and amending, readjusting those tools depending on the beneficiaries. Sometimes we call them and to see what's happening in the districts and in the communes. And they are always continuously improving those tools. For example, 2 years ago and today, those tools have improved so much. When we speak of the training of the CSO, we have associations in the communes, and then the idea is to create linkages between those CSO. After 1 year of discussions, they are trying to cooperate with the managers and the SLC, and we're supporting them on advocacy techniques, and they would improve their targeting, their techniques of advocacy, for example. And for the ASREP are trained by the CSO, and every time we have community managers or the private operators, for example, they have the duty to mobilize the users of those water points to constitute what we call ASREP. And there's a training related to that. And they are training the local members. And as we said, we have training tools we use for accountability mechanisms. And we have some PowerPoints available. We also have the tools, training tools for community scorecards. We have some reference documents that we can share, because that helped us to improve the way we approach the communes, for example. And as you can see here, that we're going to explore later on, there are some other tools that we used as well that we're going to see later on. I'd like to invite you to navigate in the RunWash tool for us to explore those tools. And for that, we need to browse RunWash. So the first tool that we explored on Tuesday and Wednesday. And there are some tools that we explored yesterday, and for today we're going to explore tools related to trainings. We are not going to open them. I'm just going to invite you to consult those open source documents. For example, the number one here. I think this is describing the strategies for the reinforcement of the CSO. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 steps that the CSO in the region, in the commune, to evolve and to bring up changes on the quality of the services locally. So here, right from the beginning, when we start the strategy, we have associations who came up with different types of interventions, and we have to gather, reinforce their capacity on WASH, and we organize. We support them to support the community, and we center them and we support them with the main activities they are proposing, because they are representing the community as leaders. So, and also to monitor the outcome, as we mentioned previously. So these are the important key points developed during the training. We have phase 1, 2, and so on and so forth. So this is just to show you how we work at the commune levels. We have the network of the existing CSOs, associations, and they would become the intermediates between the communes and the users. We also have the regional OSCEH, WASH CSO, and for that they are working under a type of convention. What they have to do is just to start with officializing their entities, be it at the regional or communal, local levels. And it's the same as the national CSOs. They are working similarly as the national CSOs. So this helps to explain the concept. Here we can explain the accountability mechanisms that are also available. When we enter and click on the training documents, one of the interesting points we can share with you is those local structures is documenting the rapid gains and the outcomes they gather. And here we are speaking of accountability mechanisms. We implemented the community scorecard locally, and there was arrangements, organizations on on payments, water payments, and it was the case here. We had some issues. We have some activities that they are proposing, they are advocating the improvement of the quality of the monoblocks provided by the communes, constructed by the communes, and to use the budget available at the commune to create Dalsanplatz to be used by the community. So these are slight, small activities. These are activities that were decided locally. We had these are the results of the result of the decision made at the level of the SLC, for example. If we speak of the challenges faced by women when coming to the healthcare facilities, for example, the hygiene quality in those healthcare facilities were the target of some advocacy, so that they can build showers and latrines with the collaboration with the local masons. So this women's association could participate in resource mobilization and to support the communes. The idea is to make decisions and document the lesson learned, the decision made. The advantages are the local associations provide solutions, proposed realistic solutions to improve their situations. Of course, they may not have the control on those solutions because they are not the decision makers, but at least they can advocate and influence. Also, we have some forms to assess the capacity of those CSOs. We have different parameters like the strategic capacity, the communication techniques, the capacity to mobilize resources, financial resources, the technical expertise on water sanitation and hygiene that they're mobilizing, the external relationship with decision makers or the community, so that their advocacy activities would be successful. There is also a mechanism of evaluation, and every year they can put in place improvement plans for the coming years. So this is an example of tools proposed by Ranwash, and we use this for the Sesame. This is functional, but not really operational, but this can be used for by the projects, the coming projects. You have these results, and those results, those outcomes are available to you. We also have a list of tools to check the efficacy of the performance of those CSOs. For example, to have the tendency to provide support or just provide ideas. There is a mechanism that allow us to measure with some specific parameters we also have what we showed earlier that we are using to verify the rate of participation of the CLC, CSO during the dialogues and the discussions. So all those tools are available. Here, for example, we have a tool. This is a tool we use to assess if the WASH CSOs and their participation in the meetings regionally at the regional or the communal level, and how they participate in the decision making. And this is not just to be present, but to participate in the decision-making process. So we have other elements that can be interesting to you. We have information on the assets and the weaknesses. When we speak of accountability mechanism proposed by Renforcer. So the communes locally also have tools to mobilize, and we also talked about this guide of the users was created by the Ministry of Trade. We have different other texts. We have tools that were developed by UNICEF and UNDP describing those accountability mechanisms and on how we can use them. The Ministry of Decentralization should do some periodic assessment. I don't remember, in 2021 they were called by the World Bank, and then we shared some feedback. So normally the DSLC guides would be elaborated from the experiences after the evaluation of the effectiveness of those SLC and how we can improve their approach and their status. I think that I'm going to stop here. I have 5 minutes left, and I'd like to invite you to ask questions on the chat box. We have questions on the chat box, so we're going to try to read them and answer them. You can write in Malagasy, you can ask questions in Malagasy, whatever. It's okay. I'm going to share the questions I see on the screen. The first question: what is the accountability mechanisms that are the most used based on your experience? What I can share, it is tricky. It was tricky at the beginning. We had the tendency to choose. We have different types of users. We have people who do not want to be seen when they make complaints, and they prefer to use idea box. This is a mechanism which is used for people who do not want to be known and seen, and which is limited actually to people who know how to write and read. We have information, however, and we'd like to say that we need to reinforce the communication, and we need to support and engage with the community so that they can communicate. We should help the community to express themselves. In our experience, normally during the community meetings, we open the ID box, we read the ID box, and the other members can also express themselves. So the mechanisms should be adapted to the type of community. When the SLC are very effective in some places because they're analyzing the causes of the different issues, and they can also have the capacity to establish action plans, for example. And all this is based on the types of services by the water services provider, the local masons. But the constraints is we need to have the capacity to facilitate, high capacity of facilitation to do such. So that is something which is advised and encourage people to express themselves. If you have the actors who have the capacity to do so. The third thing is the green line. It was used by Ranwash. We had feedback on the commune, the manager, the service manager. So sometimes it is used for information sharing. It is true for a certain period of time we can develop different types of accountability mechanisms, and the community may have its own choices depending on the situation. When we speak of idea box, the second question, do we stock information and validate information or complaints by the community? Some communes are using those idea box in the Fukutani. What we can say is it should not be used in the commune because it is limiting the access of the other Fukutani. And sometimes before when they go to the town hall, they would forget the complaints. We have some organizations in the communes, in the Fukutani, who are using these just next to the office of the system manager in the sites of intervention nearby the water points. So the choice is to be defined in the communes and by putting in place the chosen mechanisms. We need to have the support from the communes on how they can manage those idea boxes. We also need to have a calendar, and the wash agent or services in the commune should set a calendar to go down into the localities to do the collection of those complaints sent into those idea box. And after that, there should be discussions with the community members on the complaints sent in the idea box. From Radu, according to your evaluation up to date, what is globally the level of appropriation of the different tools and structures, multiple structures, by the community and the local CSOs? And how much time do we need for the process? For Ranwash, we have communes that were selected, and the mechanism currently is 6 or 5 years old. There were communes were selected 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. What we should observe based on those structures, for the first year, they were very active, and they need to work on realistic activities. And on the second year, we have the mixture of roles, overlapping of roles and responsibilities, the STEH, they are all working on local sensitization activities, and the idea is, how do we come up with something realistic, some big changes in the communities? So that is for the WASH CSOs. We should discuss on how we can improve the quality of the services. Sometimes there is the confusion between the roles of the communes and the community agents. on behavior change, and on the other hand, the responsibilities of the CSO, the SLC, which is also working similarly as the CSO. So we need to have a look at those overlapping of responsibilities between those actors. And the most important thing is the final outcome to the long run, so that we can come up with economy of efforts. We centralize the efforts, and on that sake, those structures are not mandatory. It is adapted to the situation, adapted to the context and the local decisions. So the SLC is required by the law, and the CSO is pushed by the national network. So they are implemented locally. Then it's up to them to animate and facilitate their networks. The CLC are means for the communes to collect information and to share information and to bring those information to dialogue spaces. We need to say that on the fourth year, we could realize that those are active organizations, but it's very important to separate their responsibilities, and that should not change their willingness to bring up changes in Tana, in the regions, in the communes. That should not change the willingness, the willingness of those CSO to advocate on this sector. And then we had the communes that we could accompany for 2 years, and we came up to changes. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah, you did answer my question. I added another question. I just added another question based on your explanation. Do you see the question? What are the practices and traditional social organization exploited in the frame of the adaptation of those tools and structures locally? And as I said, these are done locally, and sometimes we have forms of mechanisms that they are using locally, and this is to push and to reinforce those types of mechanisms. But also to advocate on the quality of wash surfaces, and to take those points to be discussed. And as we all know, the study we're doing is to do the diagnosis. Who are those people who are the category of people who are not included in the decision making? And sometimes those meetings were just made for men. We also need to engage the discussions, and we put in place mechanisms, and see how we can be inclusive during this meeting, we adapted that, and when we set those mechanisms, there were already, in some places, there were already operational mechanisms. And the question is why those mechanisms did not work properly, and those traditional authorities should be approached to see and to try to understand how we can adapt and develop those existing mechanisms for quality wash surfaces. So we are valuing those tools locally. I don't know if that responded to your question, Radu. Okay, I think it is just a debate. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Actually, I tried all those types of tools, and I said those tools are very important and interesting. And in sub-Saharan Africa, they're using the same tools. And my question is this is a debate on how we can adapt those tools depending on the context and local culture. That is an idea, a reflection, and because we are working on an international organization, and we are tempted to just adapt or those mechanisms which are used in different other countries, and we need to look closely on how we adapt and to what extent we adapt those mechanisms to the local situation. That is just a contribution to the reflection. Thank you. I think it's a very interesting intervention, and that's why we are pushing the discussions further. And at the beginning, we worked with the communes, and we are asking what mechanisms is already existing, and after that, sometimes when we intervene, when we have a functional ID box, for example, and sometimes in order to avoid the suing or something like this, they would say that the mechanism is not operational, it's not functional sometimes. And based on the reflection you sent, Ranwash did it at the level of the regions of interventions. They discussed a lot about this, and in some regions the adoption of mechanisms of accountability has been implemented by another project. The idea is how do we use those tools, and the idea is how do we engage the dialogues, the discussions, and that's why we said that it's very important to have a date, and we need to push them to big changes, and the the solution is not cultural, but at a certain points during the evaluation, the mechanism of accountability, the conclusion was there were lots of discussions, but very less less accomplishment, less action taken, and that was one of the issues. So we need to build their capacity on how to transfer theory to actions, and we need to be very careful. We need to know how to adapt those mechanisms. We should not. We also need locally to have periodic discussions on how we can adapt those tools so that they can become more effective. And thank you so much for that comment. Just to finish and to participate, we have a complaint system management, for example, and which are focused on the procurement, on constructions, and those complaint management system was exposed in every month. There is no complaints, and when there is no complaints in the box, it doesn't mean that there is no complaints at all. So it depends on the type of mechanism we are putting in place. So we need to adapt those tools to the context, the local context. So, and I agree that if we try to be in the shoes of the other people, I think we can solve different problems. That's why I'm talking about traditions and culture, and it depends on the context. It's a kind of reflection I'd like to put on the table, and there are types of tools that we can use in one place, but cannot be used and cannot be appropriate in another system or organization, and it's up to us to have to look at it in an eye that we can adapt these tools to the context, the real context. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that comment. Culturally speaking, it is something very important. When we visited the communes of interventions, when we spoke with the mayors, with the service providers, like the managers of those water supply providers, and the fact of claiming and expressing comments is always very difficult in the rural areas in Madagascar, and especially for those rural communities. And we heard a lot that the flexibility of the authorities, the service providers, which is facilitating the use of those mechanisms of accountability, and people prefer to speak with flexible people. And if there's somebody at the level of the system management, they prefer to speak and go and meet face to face with that person. And the most important thing is the training of the local authorities, the service providers, so that they would be more open, more flexible, more open to the feedbacks provided by the community. So people who are the beneficiaries of the decision made at different level. And I just wanted to say something about that, not just on the mechanics of accountability, but we need on the same in parallel to train those authorities. Thank you, Av. Thank you. Goodbye.